works really well. I may have to shout. We're going to get started in just a minute. We have some people on Teams because we said we'd do this in person and virtually. But we did allow for enough room for people to space out. But maybe if we can move up here, we can have more of a conversation. Just a thought. And maybe not. Or I can come down there. And we'll give it just a couple minutes and we'll get started. And ending on time or early if possible. So I want to thank you all for coming. I know we have SUSD staff, we have board member Beckman here. I want to thank our students, Avery and Thomas, who are helping with the technology, and Todd, who's also helping with the sound of the lights, and Jonathan for the live stream. My name is Scott Menzel. I think you know that. I'm the superintendent here at Scottsdale, and one of the things that I committed to when the governing board was interviewing me, and then as we were setting our goals, was to hold town hall meetings in each of the 5 learning communities as an opportunity for me to learn more about the community, what's unique and special about Arcadia, what are our opportunities for growth, and how that information can help feed into our district strategic planning process. So tonight, I'm all ears. I want to listen to what you have to say. I'm probably going to sit down at the edge of the stage because I want it to feel more comfortable and less formal. But really, this is about me hearing from you, understanding, what are the points of pride within the Arcadia Learning Complex and in Scottsdale Unified School District, and then we can transition to what are the opportunities for growth. At the end of that conversation, we can turn it to an open-ended Q&A forum. I'm really happy to answer questions, at least the ones that I can, and address any things that are on your mind this evening. But with that, I would like to open it up. We do have people roving around with mics. We are also going to be capturing information that you share so that we can put that into a document to help inform the strategic planning process. But tell me, what's special about Arcadia? The staff, I heard the staff.
My name is Susan Spear, and I've been at Arcadia High School for about maybe 9 years now. Been through 4 principals, and I think one of the best things this year about Arcadia is our new principal. We're thrilled, and I'm happy to say he's the best principal we've had, and he's exactly what we needed here at Arcadia that we've been wanting, and I'm just thrilled to see that he's here.
Thank you, Susan. Other things about Arcadia or the Arcadia Learning Complex? Points of pride, things that I should know about as a new superintendent. The kids are great.
Can I take my mask off? My name is Susan Rahoff, and I have a senior and a sophomore, and I've lived a mile from here for 20 years, so I can honestly say the community in Arcadia is pretty much like none other. I feel like the Arcadia community rallies at, like last year at the end of the year, total disaster for graduation, parents, community rallies, we have a parade, I just feel like whenever, whether it's something good or something that negative that they need help, the Arcadia community just rallies, the businesses, the parents, we just do.
And I agree that that's a strength. The more engaged the community is, the better for the school system. So thank you for that.
I would also say our teachers. I think we have amazing teachers that have been here a long time. I think it's a great place to work, and so they do stay. And I think that we have amazing, amazing teachers. And I would also say that at times I think we have the right size school, and sometimes we don't. So I think when we have the right size school, we're a much better school.
Thank you, Susan. Other points of pride? Yes.
Hello, I'm Karen Perry, and I have a son who's a sophomore here, and this is his second year. I really love the extracurricular. The football is great. The basketball was good. You know, you had your social distancing, but you still let the kids do something outside of them being at home. So it was a blessing for us, and my son loves all the coaches, so I really enjoyed the extracurricular for my son. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other points of pride? And staff, you're able to share points of pride too. You've been here for a while.
Hi, King Jay Gazinski, principal here at Arcadia. I will just say in my first year, I've been just blown away by the support of the community and just the patience that everyone's had through a really challenging year. And I think that all the communication I've had with our families has been whatever their response is always whatever we can do to support you and support the kids. They have great ideas. And if you walk through our campus, you saw the chairs out there. That was something that came out of our coffee sessions. So I'm just very blessed to have such a supportive community.
Thank you, Dr. J. We have one online. Shannon, can you read that?
So this came in online from an anonymous person, and it says, AHS has special traditions, and the neighborhood and community is amazing.
Thank you, Shannon. Other points of pride? Out of curiosity, how many people here have students at Arcadia High School? Okay, how many have students at Ingleside Middle School? Echo Canyon? Tavon? All right, helps me to just kind of get a sense who's in the room, so I appreciate that. Yes. And Hopi, yeah, I see Tamara standing there. I should have known that. Thank you.
I am just disappointed with the turnout tonight. I was hoping there'd be more people, but I think I'm hearing from parents, just so you know, that when the email went out on Thursday, which was right before the long weekend, parents were unaware, community members, that it was this Wednesday, that it was the first town hall was at Arcadia. So while I think we're doing a really good job of getting the word out now, I think that we're at a disadvantage because ours, it came out Thursday right before the long weekend, and then we had 2 days to let people know about it. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and as I think you probably know, as we're putting these things together, scheduling the logistics in all 5 learning communities and doing it in auditoriums, in part so we could ensure social distancing, in part so that we could do it with both a blend of in-person and hybrid, complicated that. It's an opportunity for growth. I do think the more advance notice we can give, the better. And I'm certainly hopeful that this will not be the last opportunity for us to engage with the Arcadia learning community in this kind of a format. Other points of pride?
I just want to say thank you for doing this and being here and listening to Arcadia families. I think that one thing that's so important is that we do listen to some of the parents that have been talking a lot, and there's been a lot of things said over the past few years, and for a lot of time the district isn't following through with some of the things they've said. So I hope that you guys will do that, and I thank you for putting yourself out here and being here for that. Also, I'm on a group chat and there's a bunch of people trying to get on right now and aren't able to get on. So I don't know. They're saying it's spinning or something. So.
Okay, so they need to refresh the link to Microsoft Teams and they should be able to get in. And we definitely want to be able to include both the in-person and online. Got another comment over here.
Right. I think our emphasis on social emotional learning in the Arcadia complex has been amazing and something I know as teachers we're really proud of. So definitely a plus.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I also feel staff and administration has been very supportive. I mean, I think through everything, everybody's been very positive. So that's good to know as having children in our Arcadia community. They have been very pleased with teachers who are with tons of different schedules and administration and just supportive of that.
Thank you.
We've got some more comments online. Dr. J is exactly what AHS needed. And then parents support starts in kindergarten and continues through the senior year.
That parent engagement is absolutely critical for student success. Yes, you have another?
Yeah, we had one more. Just one comment that someone would have felt better if it had been meeting outside instead of inside.
Any other points of pride before we shift our focus?
Let's see. Oh, see, it works for you. It's me. One more thing I just wanted to say that I think Ms. Cadera has done above and beyond as an interim principal and doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Anything else? So as you all know, this has been a year unlike any other, starting from spring break last year all the way through this current year, and we've had to move and pivot in a lot of different directions. But as a district, this is an anomaly, and it will not define where we're going in the future. So we've started a process, a strategic planning process, to really think about what will Scottsdale Unified School District look like in the next 10 years? What is our preferred future? What do we want to be able to say when we think about the next decade? What will it look like for our students? What will a graduate look like? And what are the things that we need to be able to do in order to provide the desired future for our students? So in that process, sometimes we get tied to our current reality and our thinking can be pretty limited. We've been trying to say, let's think bigger and broader than just where we are now, and not just think about incremental change, but really what will it take to ensure that every graduate in Scottsdale Unified School District is given a world-class education where they're prepared to compete with any student anywhere around the world. That should be the hallmark and the legacy of Scottsdale Unified. We have an amazing staff. We have supportive parents. We've got a tremendous community that's been willing to invest in the school system. And we have students who have been successful, but we also have stories of students who have not achieved their full potential. And so we want to think about what are those opportunities for growth? What are the things that we could be doing really to create that destination picture of our future? So I'm interested in hearing what you would like to see in the next 10 years. If you were in a time travel machine and we were coming back here in 2030, 2031, what would we be talking about as accomplishments for Scottsdale Unified School District?
I organized my notes a little bit differently. I really organized them in more short term and then long term. Short term, from my perspective, is I've seen a large focus and discussion about the kids who are failing as a result of the pandemic over the last year and being 50% less instruction and being online. But my concern is not just the failing students. I think we're always concerned about the failing students, and I think we should be. And I do know that in my mind, everything that's been discussed about the failing student for the summer is the same thing we always offer. So I'm not seeing anything innovative at all when it comes to the failing student. But what about the A student and the B student and the C student who no doubt have missed concepts and very important instruction as a result of this last year? Nothing has been discussed in any governing board meeting or anything that I've seen. And that's a huge frustration for me because I have a kid, he's an A student, but did he miss out a lot of what he needs to know? Yes, he did. And what are we doing about that? And that has not been addressed. So I would really encourage your administration team to go back and readdress that. I think also short term, we need to discuss what's going to be done this year in May for finals to make sure that it is equitable for the student who is in person and the student who is at home. Because we all know that there is an advantage to being at home. You can have your notes, no one's really watching, they're not proctored exams. Heard about it today about a kid that did that. So I just want to make sure that it's equitable for the kid that is in person and at home, the final exams, because it does count, it's their grades. I feel like the quarantine policy now needs to be updated. I feel like the CDC has come out about the 6 feet. We're still at the 3 feet. Now we're still at the 6 feet. So all that needs to be updated. We've got to look at the data. The data is showing it's not spreading in our schools. And the data is also showing that there's very low transmission rate right now in the state of Arizona. So that needs to be updated. And I don't think we need the CDC or the Dr. Sunshine to tell us that. I think that's just common sense. We can just look at our own data and make those decisions at this point. Another thing short term is some of the inequity within the facilities of the different high schools. I sat at Desert Mountain High School on the baseball field yesterday, and I couldn't help but look at their locker room for the baseball team. And we don't have one for our baseball team. And honestly, all we need is a 4x4 room near the field. That's it. And there is discussion of letting us use the football stadium visitor side, but that's nowhere near the baseball field. And so I do want the district to take a look at what some of the high schools have versus what some of the other high schools do not have, and see what we can do to try to make them a little bit more equal. Another thing, I think one positive thing that did come out of the quarantining or the pandemic was the teacher office hours. And now that we're in school full day, we don't have office hours for teachers anymore. And if you go to college campuses, every professor, they all have office hours. So I think that long-term, short-term, that's something that from 2:20 to 3:20 in the afternoon, maybe twice a week, teachers could offer that time to be in the classroom. Either the kids come in or they can even do it online. So I think that's something that you might want to consider. Long-term for Arcadia, I know that the different high schools have different designations. So Saguaro has a math and science designation. Well, I kind of laugh because we offer the same courses at Arcadia. My kids took them in math and science. So I'm not sure why we can't get the same designation and why our kids can't have that same math and science focus if they want to. Why are we just limiting it to Arcadia or to Saguaro? Like I say, we offer the same courses at Arcadia, and I think it'd be wonderful for our kids to be able to be a part of the math and science program if they choose to do that. I think we need to get in the classrooms more often and see what's really happening, what's working from an instructional standpoint and what's not working from an instructional standpoint. And I think it needs just to be more often. I hope that in the future we're doing away with half-day Wednesdays and that we will go back to 100% of instruction, which is what I believe our kids deserve. I understand the need that teachers have this year for teaching online and teaching in the classroom. I think that's very difficult for them. I was happy to see that SUSD came out and said we're back in person full time. in the fall, but I do hope we will get rid of the half-day Wednesdays. But we might want to consider something like Thrives, which was a program that Arcadia had years ago. And that would start like at 1:30, let's say on a Wednesday. And instead of letting the kids go home, they're released from their class, but they have opportunities to go visit another teacher or do some tutoring or get some help on something or retake an exam. I think the Thrives concept was very, very strong. I think the mistake we made was by letting the students leave campus. And so maybe we can revisit that concept in the future, but have the students stay. Long term, I sure hope we keep Arcadia at a manageable size, because Arcadia is a great school, but it is a great school when it is the size that it should be. And I think around 1,700 is that sweet spot. I know that it's hard to manage it because you want to be able to offer all the different courses that all the students want. But at the same time, we don't want to get too big like we did before, where we don't even have room for kids in the parking lot or at lunch. And then lastly, I just hope that our district will remain student driven and student focused. And I feel like we've gone a little bit away from that. That should be the number one, student driven and student focus.
Thank you, Susan. I want to come back to some of your short-term things when we get to the other Q&A part, but other ideas about where we should be going in the long term, opportunities for growth, things that you would like to see that we don't have currently within the district or within Arcadia High School, other ideas that you might have.
Hi, first of all, thank you for doing this tonight. Really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on long-term, but I struggle with the framing of this in the way the terms I'm hearing, such as world-class, internationally competitive, globally competitive. What do we want a graduate to look like in the 10 years? And the reason I'm struggling with that is I don't know what those words mean in the context of a K-12 school district in Arizona. I don't know if that means, as far as what does a graduate look like? I think a graduate at Arcadia looks 425 different ways. And so I don't really know what we're doing with those words and what they mean. And I would say that most of us, if we do find a meaning in one of those words, I bet we don't all agree on it and we see it differently. And my concern is, what does it mean? How are we measuring it? Are we measuring globally competitive by whether a few students go to a particularly competitive college or go overseas, or whether we do well on the SAT tests or the PISA tests? There's just a lot of lack of clarity about that as something we're trying to build our future on, to me. And if it's a concept that I'm just not getting, then I think probably a lot of people are in the same boat. And if we could define what that means a little better, I would appreciate it, rather than trying to build our ideas and our goals based on kind of an ambiguous term. So that's just a concern I have about, because I think that we should have some more concrete definition to that. But my more immediate concern with that as our view right now is that I'm afraid that I feel like we're switching gears from a year that has been, I'm sure we all agree, a very challenging year that's put us all in a very reactive mode as parents, as teachers, as administrators, as a superintendent. We've been reacting and dealing with lunch schedules and teaching schedules and Zoom links and microphones that don't work, and how our kids are doing, and all kinds of things on a very immediate basis. But I feel like we're kind of skipping next year a little bit as we look forward to this, think about what this graduate in 10 years looks like, and I wonder where we're finding the resources to address next year are, and where our attention is toward that. I think this supports a lot of what Susan was saying. I'm not just talking about catching kids up academically, but I'm talking about making them whole, helping them re-engage, helping them refine the joy in school. And I feel like we're skipping that. And Susan mentioned she hasn't heard any conversation about that, and I agree. I listened to a board meeting a couple of board meetings ago, where there was a presentation talking about
project-based learning and group work and meeting students where they are and social and emotional learning. But then when it came down to what we're going to do, it was about using iReady to assess how kids are doing on math. And it just did not match up to the kind of bigger goals that were being espoused. And I think next year is going to be a unique opportunity in our history to reteach, to relearn, to re-engage. And without really focused effort going into that, I'm afraid we just lose that opportunity and never get it back. I don't know if that really addressed the question, but that's what I had on my mind. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to take just a minute to build on the question about world-class and internationally competitive and some of what that means. There have been conversations, and anytime you use words, if you don't define them, people can bring their own meaning to them. So from my perspective, what we're looking at is to be the best in Arizona is probably not the standard for a Scottsdale Unified School District graduate. It's not good enough, I think, for them in terms of what's aspirational and ambitious for their future and what it is they're going to need to be able to know and do to be competitive. And the world's changing rapidly. And so when we look at benchmarking against the best, the benchmark is not just Arizona or the Valley or other states. It's really, we're competing with kids all around the world. And so looking at what are the best educational systems producing the highest level of outcomes, and it could be measured by PISA. PISA is given every 3 years, and it's not really a measure that you can use on a regular basis. It's often used as a metric to identify, are we competitive with others around the world? But there are other measures that we can put in place that will tell us, are our kids mastering core content standards, and are they mastering the others, critical thinking, problem solving, the ability to navigate in a complex environment with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of the things that our students are dealing with that we didn't have to when we were in school. It changes the environment. We have so many opportunities. And so when we think world class, it's about benchmarking against the best. If I use an athletic metaphor, I want to be competitive with the championship teams, not with the B League. And so however that comes out in the strategic planning process, the language and the words will be defined to help make that clearer so that there's less of the ambiguity that people have identified. But really, it's about having a very high set of expectations for all of our students so that they're prepared to pursue whatever their version of a preferred future is for themselves. Each individual gets to and needs to have the skills necessary to do what it is that they want to do in their future. And that's part of our job, is to equip them with the skills and hopefully ignite the passion to pursue those things. And I see examples of success all the time. I have conversations with former graduates from Arcadia, Saguaro, Chaparral. I know what they can rely on from their prior experiences. They'll talk about the teachers who made a difference in their lives. And then there's something beyond high school, whether it's community college, four-year degree, vocational education, but there's something beyond this. And we're trying to make sure that we're preparing them for success in whatever is beyond school. So that's part of our conversation. And in terms of next year, we haven't forgotten that. There's a lot of work being done by the building level administrators. There are a lot of conversations about where are we identifying gaps. And so while some of the most significant concerns that have elevated at the board table are about those who may be really far behind, it's not as though we're ignoring those who might have missed parts and pieces. We're really trying to zero in on what are the things that were missed, because the other thing we don't want to do is reteach an entire year. Some people have suggested, just have a do-over. But many of our kids have mastered the essential concepts that are necessary to make progress and move to the next level. And so we want to really be personalized and focused in that support so that it's relevant and meaningful for each student. And I believe if you talk to Dr. J, that there are conversations at Arcadia about where are the students at all levels and how do we ensure that we can take them from where they are to being able to master the content and move forward in our curriculum successfully. But I don't think that those are, I think those actually contribute. We need to be very clear on what we mean with the terms that we're using if we're going to paint a compelling vision for the future of our students. Other thoughts about the future, what you would like to see? If you could wave a magic wand and you were going to say, the Arcadia of the future is, what would that be? You got some online?
And I'm going to group a couple of these. There were some questions about concern on planning for the future when we're still trying to get through this year of COVID and what that looks like. And then wanting the students to learn what they really need in their lives, real life things, giving our students the possibility to learn about themselves, who they are, what they want, what they care for as part of the future. More partnerships with the community, and continuing online distance learning for more students, both as a way for them to receive enrichment courses and remedial courses. So I'll let you. We've got a lot of comments online, actually. Some questions about the 5-period schedule at Ingleside. That was also addressed as a concern earlier, what was happening with that. Let's see. Scrolling through here. The concern for teachers and what are we doing to listen to our teachers and their needs for next year and the future. Concerned about making sure that we're doing what we can to retain our teachers for the future after a particularly hard year. Graduation rates, college acceptance, and other measures that are equally important. How are we addressing them? So I'll stop for a little bit. There's more coming in.
Good,
Lots of questions online.
Thank you. And what's beautiful about this is we're going to be able to capture all of these things and then incorporate them as we collect from each of the 5 learning communities, and then reflect on how that comes together to help paint a more comprehensive picture of what our community thinks about where we are and where we're going. Other thoughts or ideas, things that you would like to see?
A couple of things. I think it's pretty clear that Scottsdale at a district level and even at Arcadia, just leadership, stability, that has been a real struggle. And I think for you, I think when I look 10 years down the road, I hope you're still our superintendent. I hope Dr. J is still our principal, because those are things that are so critical to the success of a district. I mean, when you have a revolving door and kind of a roller coaster ride. I mean, there's the words world class and internationally competitive. I mean, they're not in the conversation because we're like, who the heck's our leader? And what do they think and what do they want? So I feel like that is a really critical piece of seeing our district and our school move forward, is to have stable, consistent leadership in key roles. I'm also going to touch on what Susan said about enrollment. That is a really big deal at Arcadia. And wow, last year was a disaster. And I think as parents, I'm just going to use it's for me, I am so fearful that the district is honestly going to kind of stick it to us again, because we know enrollment, it's up and down. It's probably get down this year after, the pandemic and all that. There's always a fear that our school is going to get stuffed full again. And that is not where any school, much less Arcadia, operates at its best. And it puts, I can't imagine being a teacher last year. I was here in the office the second day of school, volunteering. Wow, not pretty. And so I feel like as a community, that's always in the back of our mind, that we're going to be put in that position again. So my hope is that the district is really serious about where we stand going forward at Arcadia. And I also feel like it's important for the district to look at charter schools and just different. I look in our neighborhood, and last year I was in some meetings with Patty and different board members, and I made a list of families that I personally knew that had kids in the district that were not in Scottsdale schools. And I feel like those are conversations that need to be had, like, hey, how do we draw those families back in? How do we make our schools, we got to market, we got to really promote. And yeah, I just think that's really important. When I know open enrollment is here to stay, that's just the way it is. But I feel like we really need to work on, like, you know, bringing kids that are in our district. Why aren't you at a Scottsdale school? What's the deal? You know, why are we relying on outside of our district to make our numbers? Because I feel like there's so many families and people in the immediate school communities that they need to know why Scottsdale schools are, you know, a good choice.
I would agree. As we look at the demographic data, about 10,000 school-age students live within our boundaries that don't choose Scottsdale. That's part of the focus of our marketing and communications committee. It's been an area of interest for the governing board for some time, and we're going to be very focused on that. We're going to not capture 100% of market share. That just doesn't happen in this environment. People are going to choose parochial schools for religious reasons. They're going to choose charter or other schools for any variety, but there's no way that we should be at 55% of market share. And so that is something that we'll be looking at very seriously as a part of how do we tell the Scottsdale story. And one of the things, and Susan probably remembers this because I think she was part of the interview committee, when I was talking with the community group, we talked about Scottsdale Unified, but not Scottsdale Uniform. There are unique aspects of every part of our school districts in the 5 learning communities, and it's important to acknowledge what's different and unique about those parts of our district while still creating a comprehensive and unified vision for where we're going as a school district. So I appreciate those comments. I know Dr. J and I have had many conversations about open enrollment capacity here at Arcadia, making sure that we don't open it up so wide that we get back to that prior experience. I heard the horror stories, and I believe that we've got a plan in place that ensures that we won't be there, barring, 2,000 kids coming back who live in this area, which isn't going to happen. So I think we put bumpers on there to make sure that we don't get back to that place. And we've been committed to monitoring that very carefully. So thank you for that. And in terms of being here 10 years, in Arizona, they can't give a 10-year contract, but I would love to be here in 10 years. Susan.
Well, I think she mentioned about the revolving door of leadership at Arcadia, and that's one of the reasons we're very excited to have Dr. J and his stability. But we've also had that problem with the AP positions. We've had, 3 ADs since I've been here. We've had 5 or 6 APs since I've been here. We just lost another one. She's leaving. So I don't know what we need to do, but I look at some of the other high schools. I look at Desert Mountain and I look at Chaparral. And while they've had some turnover, not nearly the turnover that we've had. And it's frankly not fair. I mean, I'm just going to come out and say that. It's not fair. And what we need to do, I think the district needs to focus on bringing us some APs here that can provide that stability to Dr. J and the support that he needs, and to build Arcadia back to where Arcadia should be. So I really, like I said, it's a fairness thing. And we lost one of our APs that I thought was fantastic to Desert Mountain. And, we lost another one to Coronado. And so, at what point can Arcadia be the focus? I think that's something that's come up in a lot of meetings, that Coronado has been a focus to rebuild Coronado and to make Coronado a better place. And I think that's wonderful, and I think that Coronado should be. But I think there also now needs to be a focus on Arcadia. We always used to say in our meetings, when is it our turn here? Because we have a lot of the issues that Coronado has. We have a lot of the population that comes from Coronado. We have a lot of the same issues that Coronado has. And I think that this school deserves that attention as well. One last thing that I forgot to mention before, and this is a minor thing, but I know I've mentioned it to Dr. J. I'd like to go back to some things that maybe we used to do and maybe they were working and we just stopped doing. For example, I brought up the idea of test corrections, especially in math. I feel like a lot of times teachers in general are worrying about the grade in the grade book and not the concept and what the kid has actually learned, and has the kid, the student learned the concepts, and are we moving ahead without really looking back at the concept? I know that my own sons, who were very, very good students, didn't do well on an exam one year, and the teacher just went on. And I remember they spent the time revisiting the exam, but most kids wouldn't do that. And I think that if we had test corrections, I know that my son here this year has a chemistry teacher that provides test corrections. So it gives him an opportunity to go back to the problem, revisit it, take the time. I think she gives just a quarter or maybe a half a point. So that's an incentive for him to do it. But it really does take time for him to go back and do it. And I really feel that if we had that, especially in math, that it would give that kid another look at that concept. So those little things, those are the kind of things that I think we can definitely improve on.
Thank you for that, Susan. Other comments or thoughts?
First, I totally agree with that on test corrections. I think that's one thing we've seen with online school where that is allowed more, not Seoul, but other online schools, and learned from the pandemic and how kids, we can be incorporating those kind of things. So I 100% agree with that. But I want to pick up on something that the other Susan said about the revolving door and stability in administration and leadership. And I would say that that starts at a different level even. We have devalued the voices of our teachers in this district, I think, for years. And obviously when the TEA was eliminated, that was a big part. That was sort of a bad step in my mind. We haven't recovered from that. And I think what that's affected too, or what affects that, is we don't have a pathway necessarily for teachers who might want to go on and do something different, might want to move into administration, might want to teach at a different grade level. We're not supporting teachers. Not only are we not really giving them the voice I think we should be, but we're not giving them pathways that we should be for opportunities. And I think there are example districts out there. Glendale Union has almost like no turnover, and most of their administration and leadership comes from within the teaching ranks when people, that's a pathway they choose to pursue. And I think that's not going to happen on its own. There needs to be an effort to bring that to SUSD and give that potential. We have great teachers here, and we are like working against ourselves in how we don't support them and their pathways. So as far as something I'd like to see in the future, that's one. Another is, I think, and I'm just going to give one example of this, there are things that we just require every school to figure out on their own and work in kind of silos. One thing I'll bring up is our college and career offices. And Jackie here does an awesome job, but I think all of our high schools are kind of operating on their own to navigate that path and come up with programs. And as college has gotten much less accessible, more expensive, more difficult, we need to be having a program. We can be a little more coordinated and support our schools in providing education for both parents and students starting at freshman year. And I think Phoenix Union does this very well, especially at Bioscience High School, where they really provide that pathway, but they support their offices more. And it's just connecting the dots, and it's not requiring everybody to reinvent the wheel in 5 different high schools. And I think there's multiple places we could be looking to do that. I loved to give I loved what Coronado did with the FAFSA drive-in. I thought that was a really good example of how our efforts can be coordinated that way. But I'd like to see more of that, both in college access and probably plenty of other areas as well.
Thank you for that. I want to build on a couple of points that you said. The book that we're having our governing board and members of the strategic planning design team read is Mark Tucker's book on leading high-performing school systems. And in that book, he talks about envisioning how we compensate our teachers in pathways that don't require a teacher to move into administration in order to make a higher wage, and really leveraging the talent of master teachers to support the system. So I think we have an opportunity as we think about the future of Scottsdale Unified to revisit how we structure employee compensation, to create those avenues and pathways for teacher leadership at a higher level, and to grow our own. We did see positive results in terms of teachers signing contracts for next year. So we range from 93 to 100% of teachers signing contracts to return. And even the 93 was a very small number who chose not to sign their contract. So we feel very hopeful about our future for next year. And I would agree that we have an outstanding group of staff and dedicated teachers and support staff all across the organization. So to me, the sky is the limit in terms of what's possible. It's how do we get our vision coordinated and aligned so that we're all pulling in the same direction. where we can leverage strength across our buildings, we should do that. And where we have unique differences, we should leverage those strengths as well. So I think the opportunities are endless here.
Hi, I just wanted to hit on a couple of things. One thing was the marketing. I want to piggyback on that. I just met a mom at a birthday party for my little 5-year-old, and she has, 5th graders ready to go into middle school, and she's kind of trying to figure out what to do. And so I think like right now, like this season, the spring season is the perfect time to capture those 5th graders going into, the middle school transition, and also the, high schoolers. And she just was kind of like, her end game is Xavier for her daughter, but she's like, do I need to go private to get them? I'm like, I don't think you do. And I was going to send her some stuff, but I think there's a whole population of people that just don't know what academic opportunities there are at the middle schools that we have. And, same thing with the high school. I think that AP Capstone program, that new program is amazing, and I don't know that, some 8th graders know that is an option at Arcadia, and I think it's a really great program to highlight. So I think this is a great time to try to maybe, target some of those families. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just more on a micro level in the classroom. And I think it's done really well in the grade schools. It actually has done really well with my child that's at Ingleside. And I feel like this is a piece that kind of falls on the wayside at the high school level. I have a junior as well here at Arcadia. Just in hearing during the pandemic, and then I get feedback from my 8th grader, and that I don't get as much from my 11th grader, but I get some. And he thrives in the classroom with some of his teachers that just offer opportunities to debate issues, and they don't give their opinions about it. They want this group to talk about this subject, and they can choose what side they want to be on, and they get to have those debates. And it's so intellectually invigorating for them, not to have somebody tell them what to think, but to really have that dialogue. And I feel like in high school, that opportunity, I guess the teachers feel more at liberty to interject their opinions into an academic subject, where I think that you lose some of the intellectual curiosity that way. And so it would be my hope that a best practice in the classroom would be that across the board. So I think that would help our students thrive in free thinking and just, academically better. So.
Appreciate that feedback. We toyed with for a little bit on the marketing side, instead of a director of communications, a chief storyteller, because I don't think we tell our story well. So I appreciate the multiple comments on that, and also the other comment about what's happening in the classroom, because we want our students to be critical thinkers, problem solvers. We want to tap into their creativity. That's what education's all about. Other comments or thoughts about where we're going? We have some more of those, and is that Karen back there?
We have had a lot of online comments. We've had some questions about social emotional needs, making sure that not only we're educating, but the safety and health of students in the classroom, and their social emotional needs. Again, things about taking care of our teachers. Okay. This one says, making sure our schools are healthy learning environments, upgrading the school's infrastructure, ventilation, windows that open for mental health too, so schools feel less prison-like, focusing on creative community, allowing student events at school without having to rent the space, or at least making it nominal. Would go a long way in the community buildings. Overall, do things that will help promote will help promote mental health and lower stress levels on campus, and make learning and being at school for fun for the students, teachers, and community. I like the chaparral therapy dog. There's a lot of questions. So I do want to say, I know you're reading these questions as well, and so if we don't get to all of them, we'll still see them to be able to respond. The learning community has always suffered in resources and leadership when compared to our neighbors to the north, except Hope B, who has always been a draw. Until the district leadership team understands the SUSD community, the district will not be able to get the non-attending and boundary students back. You'll never get world-class learning unless you focus on teachers first. I would like to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic. I would like to know where SUSD stands on things like teaching critical race theory. I think that catches us up with the online questions.
I think we have another one here.
I just want to build upon what Dana said. You know, she's talking about 5th grade, and I remember back personally to preschool and saying that we were making a public school decision, and people were astounded. And they're like, you have smart kids, why would you send them to a public school? And so I think when you're capturing these people that you're really trying to draw back, your marketing needs to begin almost from birth, because this is already happening in 2-year-old classes. The discussion about where are you going to send your child, elementary, middle, high school. So you really need to kind of look at that. And when I talk about Arcadia, I'm a graduate of Arcadia, and what I would like to see for the long-term goal is to see Arcadia back to the way it used to be, where it was a shiny star, and it was one of the district's greatest lights. And I've just watched it dim over the last 20 years, and it has been so sad as someone who has lived here, grown up here, and is proud of their school. And I would love to see, I think with Dr. J at the helm, I think we have a much better chance of returning to maybe getting some of the glow back. But it's something that the district needs to really support. I feel like we're kind of a little bit of the red stephead child in the district. And I think sometimes the resources don't flow our way necessarily unless we really kind of make a stand. And I think some of the parents are just really tired of having to fight over and over again for what the other schools are just given. And so I guess I just am asking for, you know, the consideration to really put Arcadia in your kind of vision. We really are a special place. And I think we could get back where we are capturing the neighborhood kids and building what Arcadia could be. And I think that's been such a missed opportunity. And I really hope that you take the time to support our school.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts about the future before we turn to Q&A?
Here. I wish we could really start and work on rethinking education. I'm in the district as a parent, long-term sub, and volunteer. Everything that was said so far, we are talking about the last 13 years. I would really love to talk more about ideas and what exactly I mean. And then she has a contact for you.
Yeah. Thank you. To wrap this part up, I would just say that as we think about the future, one, we build on what we have. Two, we should never settle for good enough in this environment. Our children deserve the very best that we can offer them. So we should always be striving for exceptional in our public education experience. And we're going to deal with all sorts of issues and challenges along the way. But the engagement of community partners, of parents who are committed to supporting their students in the learning process, of teachers who work tirelessly on behalf of their students to move them through the curriculum, all of those in our support staff, every piece of the system is really important. When I have conversations with people from around the district, we don't have unanimity of thought in terms of what we should be doing, where we should be investing our resources, what's the most important thing to turn our attention to on the front end. It's why we have these conversations. We build this system in kind of it's a diverse environment, and we need to elevate all those voices in terms of identifying what it is that is a part of our collective vision for the future of the district. And so I invite you to continue to share thoughts, to raise questions, to put ideas on the table. Not every one's idea gets embraced all the time, and that's part of the challenge that the governing board and I have as we're putting it all together. We get a lot of different feedback. We have a lot of different strong opinions, and you can't say yes to everyone. And so it's really about being clear on where we're going so that those decisions that are getting made are in alignment with that vision of the future for our students. And all the time, I think we need to be centering the students in that conversation. Their future is why we exist. And so every decision should be able to pass that test. How does this help them achieve their full potential? How does this support them in their learning, not only academically, which is foundational, but also social and emotionally, ability to be able to engage in community, because we live in neighborhood and community with other people. So the skills that our students need are multifaceted. And so that's part of our work in a public education environment. And we invite the community to continue to partner with us in that process. So I'm happy to just turn to Q&A. There were some things I know that were put on the table earlier in terms of more immediately, whether it's this year or going into next year. If you can just remind me of a couple of those things, or we can turn to some that might be online.
Yeah, we've had several questions talking about Ingleside Middle School. A question here about, or not a question, but to attract the neighborhood kids, we need to build up Ingleside, that it's a big exit point. There's a lot of questions and comments about the process for the principal and where we are with that, as well as the 5 schedule block for Ingleside.
So I'm happy to talk about Ingleside for a little bit, and I think Principal Cadera has done a commendable job this year, having stepped into that role at the last minute and navigated a pandemic in a way that I'm sure she didn't anticipate when the school year started. So thank you, Principal Cadera, for all of that. We're in the process. We've had meetings with staff, the PTO, and the site council with respect to next steps, and we hope to be able to formalize a recommendation for next steps within the next week or so. When it comes to the current block schedule, the 5-period day, that's something that I've heard about since I was starting to do my research on the district. I've had an opportunity to look into how that developed, where we are at the present time. There are people who feel strongly that it's an important shift, and Ingleside went from being a C to an A school after making that shift. There are other people who point out that there are lost opportunities for students because you have less time with electives. If you're in the comprehensive gifted program, you have fewer options to choose because it's a small program anyway, so that further constrains what's possible. If you're a student with an IEP, that may constrain what some of your choices are. So there's an equity question that has been raised many times in terms of, is it really fair? And is the only way to get improved academic achievement moving to the 5-period block versus some other structure? So recently we sent out a survey to parents again, just to kind of get a sense, to take the temperature. And the surveys aren't designed to make the final determination. They're to gauge where our parents are and what they feel. Because I've had, since I've been here, any number of emails where people say the silent majority thinks. And then when we do a survey, we find out that either the community's 50% split and there's not really a silent majority, or maybe that there is a group of people leaning one way over another. On the topic of the 5-period block versus a traditional 6-period day, and not all of our middle schools have 6 periods either. Mountainside Middle School has an 8-period structure. So there are different ways of organizing middle school to reach academic success for students. We had, I looked just before I came, 289 parents respond, and over 60% think that moving back to a 6-period day makes more sense in terms of what they would like to see for their students. But there are a fair number that made strong and impassioned arguments for why it was important to maintain the 5-period block. As a district, we're going to take all that information into consideration. We're going to collect information from our teachers in terms of the pros and cons. There's a question about whether or not we move quickly to do something different than we've done this past year, or if we take time to study it and make a collective decision. As I understand it, the decision that was made to move to the 5-period block was one that some people feel was not inclusive at all in terms of parental participation. And so the way that I'm wired as a leader is that we need to engage a broader community. Not everyone will agree, but we need to commit to a process that engages the voice of teachers, that engages the voice of parents, that takes a look at what does the research tell us about best practice as it relates to educating middle school students. All of those things are relevant for consideration, and then we make a collective decision and we move forward. I worry about past practice where decisions were made unilaterally. I hear stories about post-traumatic SUSD syndrome because of decisions where they were just made and you had a different principal, you had different leadership, you had a different program. And for me, I think process matters. I think how we engage people makes a difference because it's not necessarily a single right answer for what happens at Ingleside Middle School. It's about what does the community, the collective coming together believe is the best interest of our students? How do we ensure that they're getting the opportunities they need? We want to develop a joy of learning and inspiration for their unique skills and talents. I think that can be done in a 5-period day, a 6-period day, an 8-period day. I don't think that's the silver bullet, but I think this conversation is one that's really critical to have and to be very thoughtful about how we proceed. I asked Dr. Sakos, who oversees secondary education, is it possible to move from a 5-period block schedule this year to a 6-period day next year? She said, Scott, given that we rescheduled 4 times this year in COVID, anything's possible. Is it going to be easy and does it make sense? That's another question. But our staff have shown that we're up to any task that's put in front of us given what we've navigated this year. To answer those questions?
I think that hit those. We have another one about SOL. Will you offer SOL only for people that do not want to be in the classroom next year? Please do. It is not fair for our teachers on campus to manage both, and there's cheating, advantages, etc.
So that helps on one of the other questions too. So the plan is that for online learning next year at the middle school and high school level, we'll be looking at Scottsdale Online. Middle school becomes a little tricky, and we've had some success in how we restructured enhanced distance learning for the elementary this past year. Where's Kat? Kat has been taking some leadership with respect to how we manage that, and it seems to be going pretty well. So from an elementary level, we're looking at something that's like the EDL, but modified a little bit. What we've said in terms of our commitment to our teachers is we're not going to ask them to do double duty where they're going to be dealing with students who are online, whether it's just part-time or because they're sick or because they have some other family issue. If they want online learning, we're going to offer that through Scottsdale Online. And if they otherwise, they can be in person. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't have teachers using the technology that the district invested in, because there are all sorts of great ways to utilize the technology, but we've made a commitment to our teachers. We're not going to ask them to do double duty. This has been an unbelievably difficult year, and they really deserve an opportunity to teach the students who are in front of them. And for families who want and need online learning, we should be providing a high quality opportunity for them with dedicated teachers in that environment. And so that's our commitment. Oh, the question about finals. Yes, that's the one. So our tech department is working with a software that will, as I understand it, and I don't want to misspeak, but there are some things that get put in place that kind of shut down everything else so that we have some more test security, even when it's done remotely. And I think that's taking place maybe even this week with a couple designated sites. And so there's a recognition that the integrity in that process between in-person and online is critical. And we believe that there may be a software fix to ensure that we have that, to your point. But I need to go back and find out from the IT department how that will work. But it's a known issue that's on our radar, especially as we're getting to the end of the year.
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much, but with one other question, what potential is there this summer for the district to pursue and utilize additional federal COVID funds for part of the recovery process next year. I know there's been some questions, and I haven't followed it closely enough about how the money is being distributed by the state. How aggressive is the district going to be about getting funds, and where might you dedicate those funds to put to immediate use? I raise that. I'm not a teacher, and anything that comes out of my mouth about ideas probably comes from my Twitter feed, so I'm not pretending that I have any expertise on this. But I've seen articles of other districts nationwide who are utilizing funds for like perhaps individual outreach over the summer, where they're paying counselors and staff members to make contact with students, to touch base with them on all things about school, academic and otherwise, how they're doing, and just trying to figure out what those students might need. And they're paying their staff to do that over the summer. I've also seen some modifications. Some districts are modifying curriculum, not to reteach classes and throw the last year away, but to identify where teachers might, in a collaborative way, where they might identify certain concepts that should be retaught in order to capture those who might have missed it, but not just leaving every teacher to do it on their own, but staff providing, able to pay teachers for that effort this summer, and then that work be collaborative and shared across different classrooms. And so those are just two examples, but I'm wondering what the likelihood of there being funds available for the district to use on things like that this summer.
So we are fortunate with ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding. I think 9.4 million for ESSER 2, 8.4, and then the estimate for the third round of funding is 23.
No, more like 19.
19. So we're looking at significant resources that we can spend over a period of time to address the impact of COVID on teaching and learning. One of our challenges, so we've talked about summer programming. How do we target it? How do we make it engaging? How do we implement a program that will draw kids in? And I was looking at enrollment figures for middle school and high school so far, and we've got less than 800 students that have signed up. But we're working to continue to find ways to engage students in that process. The bigger challenge is finding teachers who are interested in working during the summer, and it's not because they're not getting paid, it's because they're burnt out. This has been a really, really tough year, and at some point they just need to unplug and recharge their own batteries. And so that's part of our challenge, is how do we create a robust learning opportunity and recognize that many of our teachers just need, that 6 weeks or whatever it is to be able to recharge their own batteries so that they can start the next school year ready to go. We have, there's enough research that shows that, individual tutoring can make a difference. We're looking at, can we use some upperclassmen and even pay them to provide, that are skilled in the content area and have proper support. So are there other strategies that we can put in place to connect with our students? But I think all of that's on the table. We won't be using resources is the reason why we don't implement creative strategies in terms of dollars, but finding the human capital to do it is going to be one of those challenges for us.
Okay, this is, it looks at the capacity, but it says, can you fill Coronado to capacity, which in turn would help other campuses? Have you ever considered turning the campus into a thriving Spanish immersion prep school? Spanish-speaking educators that could work with the families, students, and cultures.
So I can't speak to whether or not the district has ever considered that as an option for Coronado, but I can tell you that part of our strategic planning is really thinking about what are the options for all of our learning communities, all of our schools. How do we ensure that we've got pipelines, from elementary, middle, and high school so that we can have full campuses? That's our goal. And if we were actually capturing 80 to 85% of our market share, having full schools wouldn't be our problem. And so I think there's an opportunity, but the other thing that really is critical, and I believe it from a marketing perspective, you talked about this starts at the age of 2 in a preschool conversation. We can do our marketing, but glossy brochures aren't going to be the thing that seals the deal. It's going to be those mom-to-mom conversations. It's the experience that you have with your children, and good news is really critical. Sometimes bad news travels faster than good news. So being able to really put that out there in terms of a community effort to tell the story is going to be important. And we're open to any of the suggestions for what's possible in our various schools, but we want that to be a community developed, community owned part of our strategic plan for the future.
We've got another question about district issued technology. Will that be available to every student next year?
So we are a one-to-one district officially. I believe we were on that path before COVID hit, which actually put Scottsdale Unified at the forefront of being able to respond after spring break last year. And we just had to pivot to deploy the technology that we had. I don't see us ever going back from that commitment to one-to-one. In this environment, it creates all sorts of opportunities to enhance learning. And so we plan to continue that. And thankfully, the community has been generous in their support of the district. So we've been able to make that available, and we plan to continue.
Kind of feeds into that another question. My child would like to know if kids will still need to use the laptops in classrooms next year, if there will be a return to paper. He is in person, but often has to take his Geo-Trig honors math quizzes at home. We're not sure why.
So it depends kind of answer. I was in an AP World History class this morning, and it was interesting to see the combination. You know, the teacher did have the students pull out a piece of paper for part of the work that we did, and then he turned to their Surface Pros to engage in a Padlet exercise where the results were displayed on the screen. I think it's going to be a combination of utilizing the technology in ways that enhance teaching and learning. I don't think you ever have to throw away paper and pencil because I think there's some value there. And it depends on the teacher, depends on the subject area. In terms of testing at home or not, I can't answer that question. That's a building specific or teacher specific question.
This one has popped up with a couple of thumbs ups on it is, can you invest in our AC on campus? We have major issues every year.
In what?
AC, air conditioning.
Oh, air conditioning.
Here.
It's hot in Arcadia?
No, not in, it's hot in Arizona.
In Arizona, yeah, I've noticed it's a little warm.
Oh, this particular school is the question. Okay.
In particular buildings or the entire campus?
The kids are sitting in the classrooms with no air conditioning. And it always happens in August, September, when it's really, really hot, sometimes in late May. It happens every year.
Right.
We've gone through this. So when we talk about equity amongst campuses, that's one of them.
So I appreciate that. One of the things, and if you've watched the governing board meetings, you probably know this, but we've created a finance and facilities committee because there's a lot of work to be done. And when we think about our facilities, equity in facilities is an issue that's come up. The bond issue from 2016 really did a lot of work in terms of elementary rebuilds and some refurbishing. Our high schools haven't really gotten that review since at least 10 years, maybe 15 years ago. And so we believe that we need to have a 10-year facilities plan that really identifies what are the needs in our facilities. We do have some capital override funds and some plant funds that can help with some of those short term. But what we also need to do is really have a clearer picture of what all the needs are so that we can do that in a planful way. I think Dennis Railer does an amazing job of assessing those needs and responding as timely as possible. But we also don't want to just keep putting Band-Aids on problems. We want to really think about what's the long-term solution that's sustainable over time. And so that's part of our commitment as well. Address the short term. No air in August is a really bad thing. Also, let's address the long term in terms of structural issues so that we're implementing efficient technology that meets the needs of our kids, creates the kind of learning environment that supports our students and staff.
So we have another one here that says, how is the district addressing academics in a new way so there is actual improvement?
So when you think about how we're doing that, every day teachers are doing formative assessments as they engage with their students and gauging whether or not the students understand the content. Oftentimes, people on the outside looking in will look at AZ merit scores or ACT or SAT scores and use that as the sole indicator whether or not our students are mastering the content. That would be like you going to your doctor and they only take your temperature and then pronounce your health. It's one indicator. It's an important indicator, but it's not the only indicator. So as we go forward, we're looking at multiple data points in order to determine how well our students are doing. We know what the content is. Our teachers are skillful in terms of being able to identify whether or not students have mastered the content. They can go back and help address areas where students might not have mastered it or maybe struggling. And so there are a lot of different ways to measure that. We're in the process of procuring a data warehouse that will allow us to actually put forward a public-facing data dashboard that helps tell the story of where we are. From an internal perspective, it will be so granular that teachers can look at individual students and really gauge how they're performing and where they may need additional support. From an external facing view, we can look at what's happening at a building level, at the district level, and we can identify trends over time. That will help in terms of how we invest resources and identify where additional supports are needed. So some of the data we have, some of it we may need to create. You may recall last fall, we did some benchmark assessments as a gap assessment to identify what learning loss might have happened when we shut down for the fourth quarter last year as kids were coming into the school year. I anticipate we're going to need to do something again as we head into this next school year, just to identify where our students are. And that's non-judgmental. They are where they are as a result of the pandemic, and we're not going to cast any blame, but we're going to use that data to then help accelerate learning so that students who are off track can get back on track. And the other thing that we want to do is support students who are already running to let them run as fast as they can. We talk about, you'll hear in a lot of the academic literature, people talk about the achievement gap. I really think we need to reframe how we look at this to an asset-based lens. Oftentimes it's an opportunity gap. And we don't want to create an artificial ceiling. So we want to create high expectations for all students. And the question is, when and how long does it take to get them there, not what's the gap at a particular point in time? Because not all students learn in the same way, the same rate, but what they need to be able to do to be successful when they leave our schools, that's a high bar that we should have and hold for every student. I think we have some hands up in the audience here.
I just have a question regarding, I know, how disjointed this year has been. I just have one of my son's grades is really bothering me from the semester. Is there a district policy or is it a site-based decision? Is there any leeway to go back and, like, if the teacher does offer test corrections, to revisit maybe some lost learning and recoup that first semester grade, or?
That would be a question that I need to bring up with the principals. I don't know if they've had that conversation or not. I'm generally, so I'm not speaking to the specifics for this year, I generally am a fan of I care about the learning. The grades should reflect the learning in some respect, but a point in time test, I think that opportunity for the test correction, we did make an adjustment in Scottsdale Online in the fall because we wanted to make sure that we weren't penalizing students unfairly. I don't know if it's possible to change last semester, given where we are in the process. So that's something I'd have to look into.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
This actually isn't a question, but it is a comment. I have an 8th grader at Ingleside. I have a junior here at Arcadia, and I have 2 Arcadia graduates. My husband was also a Hopi Ingleside Arcadia graduate. We've been around a while. We've been here, specifically our family, 13 years. And I've seen some history in the district. You're totally right. There is some PT SUSD syndrome for sure. But what I want to say is I'm so incredibly grateful to have you at our district. And I think you came in at a time that was the most challenging situation that we've dealt with in generations, especially from an education perspective. And I'm really grateful and proud to be an SUSD parent, watching how you guys have managed the pandemic and offered opportunities for our kids to stay learning, kind of titrated the way that we bring students back. I think it's been really thoughtful and really data-driven. I have friends that live all over the country, and everyone has experienced this in a different way. I'm really grateful and proud for how SUSD has managed it. I can't say enough good things about the local site leaders that we have, both at Ingleside and Arcadia, but I also believe it comes from you, and I wanted to tell you thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Other comments, questions, or thoughts?
Some more online. Can you start pre-algebra in 7th grade? We need help getting our 9th graders to a strong start in high school.
Yeah, again, that's a good question.
Pre-algebra, huh?
I said that's a good question and one to bring up with teaching and learning and Dr. Sackos, yes.
And then technology is an asset, not a liability, but training is essential to utilize it to the best of its capabilities. There are so many positive educational apps and programs out there to help teachers and to engage students in academic achievement. It's just a comment.
Anything else that we didn't address that's on your mind that you'd like to address tonight? I appreciate the conversation. I'm just glad to be in the room with people. It's one of those things where if this was a normal time, we would have had this conversation in the fall, unmasked, and we would have been able to shake hands and probably sit around tables and not do it in this far of a distance format. But I believe in the power of community, and I think Scottsdale has a very special community. And I do think that we've come together in some pretty unique ways to navigate the pandemic. And looking back, we can always identify ways that we might have been able to do some things better. But I feel pretty confident about where we are now. 49 calendar days, and we will finish the 2021 school year. And looking back, it's been quite a ride for everyone. I really feel for our parents. I feel for our students who have had to pivot multiple times, for our teachers, the uncertainty around all of this. And yet somehow coming through it all, 85% of our kids have come back to in-person learning. Those that wanted and needed to be online have been able to do so. And we're able to start slowly looking to the future. I want to be sure that as we do our planning and forecasting out, we're not ignoring next year. We know that that's going to be really important, and we don't want to miss the opportunities in front of us. But we also want to be able to create a destination picture that's compelling, a vision of the future that brings some level of hope. Depending on which news stories you watch and read, some people are always thinking that there's no hope, and other people are framing it differently. I think we have tremendous opportunities in this district, and you all are a part of that work. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know that everybody has other things that they could be doing. Just a testament to your commitment. I want to thank the people who participated online. We will be reading all of those comments. We'll be looking at the questions that are there, compiling that, and then figuring out a way to incorporate that into both our short-term and long-term planning. And with that, I want to wish you a good and pleasant evening and look forward to future conversations. Thank you very much.